Coach Rick Sullivan had trained Olympic boxers for 20 years and didn't waste time with fighters who didn't fit the profile. When Carlos Mendoza walked into his Las Vegas gym, Rick's assessment was instant and dismissive. Carlos was 5'6", 148 pounds, with the soft-spoken demeanor of someone who'd rather avoid confrontation than seek it. "Kid, what weight class are you trying for?" Rick asked, barely looking up from his clipboard. "Welterweight, sir. Maybe light middleweight eventually," Carlos answered in his Manila accent. Rick actually laughed. "Son, welterweights in professional boxing are walking around at 170, 180 between fights. You're what, 150, soaking wet, and you want to fight light middleweight? Those guys cut from 190. He shook his head. "Go find a gym that does amateur flyweight. This is professional boxing. Size matters. Physics matters. Heart doesn't overcome a 40-pound weight disadvantage." Carlos nodded politely. "In the Philippines, I fought at higher weights. I have techniques." Rick cut him off. "Let me guess. You're quick. You have heart. You've got special techniques." "Kid, I've heard it all. Every undersized fighter thinks they're special. Then they get in the ring with someone who has real size and power, and they get hurt. I'm not going to be responsible for that. There are weight classes for a reason." Carlos tried one more time. "Sir, in Manila, we train differently. Street boxing, dirty boxing techniques. I can show you." "Dirty boxing?" Rick's expression hardened. "This is professional boxing, not a street brawl. We have rules, technique, science. Whatever you learned in Manila street fights doesn't apply here. This is the big leagues." He gestured to the door. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You're too small, and I don't have time to teach you why that matters the hard way." Carlos left quietly, used to this reception. American coaches saw his size and stopped listening. They didn't understand that Filipino boxing wasn't about matching size with size. It's about using every advantage size couldn't overcome. What Rick didn't know was Carlos's background. He'd grown up in Tondo, one of Manila's toughest neighborhoods, where fighting wasn't sport, it was survival. Filipino dirty boxing wasn't a technique you learned in gyms. It was combat methodology developed over generations in street fights, prison yards, and underground matches where rules were suggestions and survival required creativity. It incorporated elements of pen-and-taken Filipino boxing, using elbows, headbutts, sweeps, and destructions techniques to dismantle larger opponents by attacking their structure rather than trying to overpower them. Carlos had learned from his uncle, a former underground fighter who'd taken down men 50 pounds heavier using angles, timing, and ruthless efficiency. In street fight, you don't box their fight, his uncle had taught him. You make them fight your fight. Big man wants distance to use power. You take away distance, he wants to use jab. You destroy his arm, he wants rules. You show him there are no rules in survival. 6 months later, Rick was cornering his fighter, Tommy the Hammer Harrison, at a professional card in Las Vegas. Tommy was a light middleweight prospect, 6 feet tall, walking around at 185, cutting to 154 for fights. He had knockout power, an undefeated record, and Rick was grooming him for a title shot within 2 years. The opponent for this tune-up fight was a late replacement, some Filipino fighter nobody had heard of, who'd taken the match on 3 days' notice. Rick glanced at the tail of the tape and almost felt bad. Carlos Mendoza, 5'6", 148 pounds, fighting up a weight class against a fighter 7 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier on fight night. "This is going to be ugly," Rick told Tommy. "Stay technical, don't get careless, put him away clean. No point dragging this out." Tommy nodded confidently. He'd seen the size difference during weigh-ins. This was going to be easy money. When the bell rang, Tommy came out orthodox, using his jab to establish distance, exactly as trained. His reach advantage was significant. He could hit Carlos from a range where Carlos couldn't hit back. The first jab snapped out. Textbook perfect. Carlos slipped it by millimeters and closed distance faster than Tommy expected. Suddenly Carlos was inside, too close for Tommy to use his reach. Tommy tried to tie him up, use his size to muscle the smaller fighter away. That's when Carlos introduced him to Filipino dirty boxing. Carlos's elbow smashed into Tommy's bicep knot, illegal but devastating to the muscle. His forearm raked across Tommy's face as he slipped a punch. His shoulder drove into Tommy's chest, compromising his balance. These weren't wild street fighting moves, they were calculated destructions, disguised as normal boxing exchanges. Techniques that existed in the gray area of the rules, legal enough that refs allowed them but brutal enough to break down an opponent's structure. Tommy tried to create distance, but Carlos was like water. Every time Tommy moved, Carlos was already there, too close, making the bigger man's advantages useless. 30 seconds in, Tommy's left arm was already compromised from Carlos's elbow restrictions. His jab, his primary weapon, was weakening. 45 seconds in, Carlos landed a perfect liver shot that Tommy never saw coming because Carlos had disrupted his vision with shoulder and forearm tactics. Tommy's body seized. He lowered his right hand instinctively to protect his body. Carlos saw the opening and unleashed a combination that looked chaotic but was perfectly orchestrated. A left hook to the temple, right cross to the jaw, another left hook. As Tommy's knees buckled, Tommy went down hard at exactly 52 seconds of the first round. The arena went silent. This wasn't supposed to happen. The ref counted, but Tommy wasn't getting up. His eyes were glazed, his equilibrium destroyed. The count reached 10. Knockout. 52 seconds. The undefeated prospect had been dismantled by a fighter 40 pounds lighter who didn't have the size for this level. Rick stood frozen in Tommy's corner, his mind trying to process what he'd just witnessed. That wasn't boxing as he knew it. That was something else entirely, something brutally effective that his 20 years of Olympic coaching hadn't prepared him for. After the fight, Rick found Carlos in the locker room. "What the hell was that?" he asked, not angry but genuinely confused. That wasn't traditional boxing. Those techniques, the elbow destructions, the forearm work, the way you controlled distance. Carlos looked up, still catching his breath. "That was Filipino dirty boxing, sir. What I tried to show you 6 months ago." Rick sat down heavily. "I called it street brawling. I said it didn't apply to professional boxing. I was wrong. That was the most effective fighting I've seen against a size disadvantage." "How does it work?" Carlos explained patiently. "In Philippines, we don't always have weight classes in street fights or underground matches. Small man fights big man regularly. So we develop techniques to neutralize size. We destroy the tools. Your fighter's jab arm. I hit it until it doesn't work right. We control distance. Big man wants space to use reach. We take it away. We use angles. Every attack comes from where he doesn't expect. We use the whole body, elbows, shoulders, forearms, not just fists. All legal in boxing rules, but most Western boxers never train it because they rely on matching size and power." Rick shook his head in disbelief. "I've been coaching for 20 years, Olympic medalists, professional champions, and I just watched you dismantle my fighter using techniques I didn't even know existed in boxing." Carlos smiled. "They exist, sir. Floyd Mayweather uses some of them. Old Filipino trainers taught fighters in America these techniques decades ago. But many coaches forgot or never learned because Western boxing became about size, power, athleticism. Filipino boxing stayed about efficiency, survival, making any fight winnable if you're smarter." Rick made a decision that changed his career. "Carlos, I owe you an apology. I judged you on size and dismissed your skills. That was ignorant. I want to learn what you know, and I want to train you properly for a real run at a title." Carlos's story spread through boxing circles quickly. The undersized Filipino who'd knocked out a light middleweight prospect in under a minute using techniques American coaches didn't recognize. Trainers started seeking out Filipino boxing coaches, learning the dirty boxing methods that had been dismissed as street fighting but proved devastatingly effective. Rick became Carlos's manager and biggest advocate, but more importantly, he became a student. He learned that Filipino martial arts panantukan, kali, eskrima, contained boxing applications more sophisticated than he'd imagined. Techniques developed over centuries of actual combat, refined in environments where losing meant serious injury or death, adapted by fighters who couldn't rely on size advantages. Carlos went on to win a regional title, then a world title eliminator, fighting opponents who outweighed him significantly but couldn't handle his Filipino dirty boxing approach. He never became a superstar. His style was too unconventional, his size too small for casual fans to believe in. But in gyms worldwide, trainers now teach the techniques he demonstrated: the elbow destructions, the forearm controls, the distance management, the structural attacks. They call it advanced infighting or technical roughhousing in American gyms. But Carlos smiles when he hears that. It's Filipino dirty boxing, the art his uncle taught him in Tondo. proven in the professional ring against bigger, stronger opponents. Rick keeps a photo in his office. Carlos, standing over the fallen Tommy Harrison, at 52 seconds of round 1. Below it, a handwritten note: never judge a fighter by his size, judge him by what he knows how to do. Lesson learned the hard way. The coach who said the Filipino was too small for boxing now teaches that size is just one variable and that knowledge, technique, and Filipino ingenuity can overcome what physics says should be impossible.